In 1973, the Strawbs were high up in the charts in England. We had two big, massive hit singles, and we had an album at #2 in the charts. We were kept off the top of the album charts by Elton John and his album Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. If I could have got hold of that bastard, I'd have shot him on sight. At the height of our fame in England, the band decided to split up. Dave and I kept the name of the Strawbs, and we set about bringing in new members of the band. Now the first guy we got hold of was a fellow sitting by the piano there, was John Hawken. Now I first heard John playing on a record. It was the first Renaissance album, or Renaissance album, which very few people know about. John, you carry on with the story.
Well, the first Renaissance album was done after the split up of the Yardbirds. Keith and Jim were tired of loud blues music. They had the three best guitarists in England at various times, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck and Clapton. And I think their ears were ringing. They'd had enough. They'd done incessant touring. And they decided to go a bit lighter. So I got a call from Keith Rolfe one day saying, "Will I come for an audition?" So I turned up, Louis Sonamo, this incredible bass player, turned up, and a guy called Brian Cole on pedal steel. Now Brian, as it happened, is an amazing musician, but he was playing so loud and so much, grinning all the while as if he really accompanied. An amazing player, but nothing to do with what they had in mind, which was quiet, classically orientated music. So Lou and I got the gig. Brian was out, so it was now a four-piece. We started rehearsing, and then we thought we need a female voice. So one day, Jane Rolfe, the sister of Keith, she used to bring us cups of tea and whatever. So Keith one day gave her the mic and said, "You sing this song," which happened to be Island. And it made it to the first album. And within seconds, she was in the band. Next minute, being fitted for beautiful clothing, and we were off to the States. And not a lot of people know about the original Renaissance, but that was us.
Yeah, that wasn't your... So John, that wasn't your first brush with the United States. What people here don't realise is that of all the people on this boat today, all the musicians, John is the only guy who had a hit record in the top 10 in the States here in the 1960s with
Tobacco Road. The national team. And we called ourselves that because at the time we were getting together, we loved the people in Nashville. The Everly Brothers, we had two singers and they had those harmonies down pat. Roy Orbison, and all sorts of people from that area, so that was it, Nashville teams. Everyone thought we were American until we opened our mouths, and it was obvious we weren't. And we came over and did the Murray the K show, and another band that was here on the last trip here, the Zombies, came over on the same plane with us. It was their first time in America, and we did 1 month of the Murray the K Christmas show in New York. The guy was as mad as a hatter. He was going a little bit thin on top, something on myself, and he used to put this black boot polish on the top of his head. And then as the evening went on, he was announcing the bands would get hotter and hotter, and this black... but he ran a tight ship, and everyone had to do no more than 2 songs. That included Dionne Warwick, Chuck Jackson, Brooke Benton, the Shangri-Las, the Shirelles, and a whole bunch of other folk. And it was quite an amazing welcome to America. And the Zombies never forgot it, and I'm sure I didn't. And that was the start of it.
Do you want to play it?
What? Oh yes, yes, yes.
Sorry. I'll 1, 2.
The only life I've lived.
But John, you also toured around the England and all over Europe with people like Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis. Did you learn anything from Jerry Lee Lewis?
Just about everything. The guy was amazing. And we had a gig in Berlin at the cycle stadium. Now they had the stage in the centre, then the cycle track went round, and I think it held about 20,000 people. It was a huge arena. And we got there early one afternoon, about 2 o'clock, and Jerry popped up quite unexpectedly. I just put the pickups on the piano. He loved the pickups I had, they were better than the ones he brought with him. And he sat down, he entertained us for 2.5 hours. He played blues, he played rock, he played gospel, and he was absolutely brilliant. But then come the night, he allowed show business to take over his beautiful playing, so he sacrificed his technique for sort of flash, put his feet up on the keyboards, and I'd rather have heard him play the way he played that afternoon, which was absolutely spot on. Unbeatable.
Can you play a bit of boogie?
Just a little one.
We realised that after we heard John playing all that sort of stuff, we realised he was exactly the right guy for the Strawbs. We gave him a Mellotron and said, what are you going to do with that? And he thought, what the hell have I got myself into? But anyway, Dave and I, as I said, we met up in a folk club. I was playing banjo quite a lot at that time. We were Britain's, the Strawbs were Britain's, or we were started out as the Strawberry Hill Boys. And we were Britain's first bluegrass band, and I played bluegrass banjo. And I met Dave in the local folk club, and Dave had hair down the back. He had wild eyes. He was he was a violent rocker. And gradually we got to know one another. We used to go around one another's house and write songs together. And then I said one day, do you fancy joining the band? He said he'd love to. So that was how he came in. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I was in a folk club was because it was the only place I could get a drink. Normally, up to that point, I wouldn't have been seen with anyone. But our bass player said, I know where we can get a drink, and we ended up in this folk club. And I saw Dave connect with an audience the way I'd never seen anybody connect before. And it's become as you, well, if you follow what we do, you probably know how he works with the talking about things and explaining things, pretty much like this. But I'd come from a completely different background. I was really into, well, I sort of Lead Belly and a lot of the blues. I loved Howlin' Wolf and his approach to doing things. And of course, all the standard thing, Buddy Holly was a big hero of mine. And then I'm going to Eddie Cochran, who I still personally think invented rock as we understand rock to be now, as opposed to rock and roll. Because he came up with these moving chord type of patterns. And then we have to, ultimately, when Dave Davis stuck his screwdriver through the speaker and we got was the sort of the start of what we now know as heavy metal, I guess. So I was really getting into these moving chords, and this will be, the reason I'm saying this will become obvious in a little while as the story progresses. But I started experimenting with shifting chords around as much as I possibly could to make a melody of the backing track, as opposed to what went over the top of it with the vocal, to actually have an integral melody in the chord sequence. And I was very lucky to be paired up with a guy called Tony Clark when I signed for Decca and Apple, the Beatles company. And I got put with Tony Clark, which was one of the nicest things that ever happened to me. He was a wonderful producer and was doing the Moody Blues stuff at the same time. And he taught me so much about things, about not to be content with what you have, just, you know, work on it a little bit more. And I had a chord sequence which he liked very much, but he just wanted me to do a bit more with it. And it ended up as a song called My Father's Name is Dad, which has become a sort of a progressive, if you like, favourite with the psycho people. So we'll play this.
I think it means psychedelic, doesn't it?
Oh, that's right, yeah. There's a difference. So, we'll give you, I mean, this is My Father's Name is Dad.
This is your first single, wasn't it?
This was the first single, yeah. Yeah, and Decca hated it. They just didn't, they didn't want to put it out. But in those days, the Apple organisation had so much power and pressure, they just said, look, you're putting it out, and Decca said, no, okay.
Paul McCartney got involved.
Paul McCartney got me to re-record it, yeah, because he thought, he'd heard it on the radio. Yeah, that's interesting actually. It came out on the Friday, as all records did in those days, the 45s. And he heard it on the radio, and I got a call over the weekend to say you're back in the studio on Monday to re-record the single, because Paul had heard it and he thought it was a very promising record, but it was missing some bits in the mix, and he wanted some extra vocals, so we went straight back in. And the new version was in the shops the following Friday, which is quite some going actually.
Don't expect supernatural intellect. Be just like the other kids. Live the world in a different place. Other things that other things how can I take the blame for anything I've done?
Strawbs had a very strange origin with me playing bluegrass banjo. In comes a guy playing rock and roll piano, and you've got a hooligan playing psycho music. And so Dave and I, now we have to find a bass player, so what are we going to do? And it so happened that Chaz's mum and my mum worked together in an office for the local authority. But I didn't know Chaz at all. We just heard from one another, mums, you know, oh, Chaz is doing very well, you know. But Chaz, how did you come to start in the music business?
Yeah.
Well, definitely our mothers worked together. I used to hear stuff about their cousins and the Strawbs, you know, they're really on the way up and all this. And but there were so many connections on this boat, how we came to be playing together, in fact. I mean, I started on various bands, and I was signed to a company called Writers' Workshop, and they had The Move, Boris Rex, they had, well, loads of them. Procol Harum, they were just doing Joe Cocker, and I was signed as a junior kind of musician, working on, you know, B-side sessions, and it so happened they signed a guy called Jimmy Thomas, who was the singer from the Ike and Tina Turner show, and they asked me to play bass on it, and they said, we need a keyboard player, can you recommend a keyboard player? Well, I just met this young fellow in a music shop in West London called Rick Wakeman. Yeah, he was still at the Royal College of Music, and he was playing in a kind of bar band to subsidise his income, really, and we became friends, and I got him in on this session, and the producers, who were Tony Visconti and Denny Cordell, sort of heard him and said, thank you very much, Chaz, he's rather useful. And the next minute Rick's playing just about everyone's sessions, really, wasn't he? And
Cat Stevens and David Bowie, he played with Lou Reed. It just was all over records like a rash.
So, but Rick wrote me a few sessions as well, really, and along the way I met Dave Lambert because we started doing some film music together for, there was an Elizabeth Taylor film called X, Y and Z, or Z and Co, I think it was called, over here.
Over here it's X, Y.
Oh, right, okay, but yeah, we all played on the music soundtrack for that. That's how I met Dave Lambert. And just fast forward a little bit, Rick went and joined Strawbs, of course, and made his name. Next minute he's front page of all the music papers, and within a very short time he was keyboard player for Yes.
Not that short.
In the scheme of things.
Rick was with us for nearly 2 years, and he joined us, and we were still playing in folk clubs. And within 6 months, we were headlining the Albert Hall in England, which was the most important venue to do of them all. It holds 5,000 people, and at the time it was the biggest venue. So we went from being a little folky type group, suddenly there we were playing almost sort of proggy rock, and not knowing really what was happening. But anyway,
very fast, yeah.
But the main connection is, the first time I met you was on a session for Rick Wakeman's album, The Six Wives of Henry VIII. And we just Rick asked me if I would bring along my electric banjo. Chaz was playing, Dave Lambert was playing, and a guy who just walked past us about an hour ago,
Alan White, was the drummer. And we did a TV show in the UK, which was the Old Grey Whistle Test, and we all played together on that. And that's the first time I played with Dave, and within a few months I was in the Strawbs. So that's
how. So Chaz suddenly became into the band via the Rick Wakeman connection, through making this album, The Six Wives of Henry VIII. And there it was. So suddenly we then had the bass player. So we set about finding a drummer. And Tony came in a bit later. Tony joined us in 1977, I think it was. And Chaz and I went out, and we knew that Tony had been playing with Rick Wakeman. So there's yet another connection here, where it all begins to link together. And but we went to see Tony, and he was, well, Tony, you pick up the story.
Stand up. Oh yeah, go on. Stand up.